Another season has just begun in the liturgies of the Holy Mother Church. After a brief season of joy, celebration, and life, now it's time to reflect upon the meaning of one's existence as a Catholic and Christian. Today's beginning isn't one of the most celebrated in the church calendar, but it is one of the most important to commemorate. Today marks the start of the season of Lent, which is one of the most highlighted seasons in the liturgies of the church. It is where love meets death and conquered it, so we all can live with Him and for Him. My dear friends, it is Ash Wednesday. It is a somber yet hopeful beginning of another chapter in our Catholic faith. But why the ashes? What does being marked by the soot of last year's ash palm symbolize? What does it mean to be Catholic and reminiscent of great suffering the Lord has displayed for us? Why is suffering and atonement an important Christian act? How do we share our sacrifices and material resentment to that of the Lord's sacrifice on the cross? For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. The words of the priest on the ceremonial marking of the ashes doesn't just resonate to the Christian history, it is resonant to the history of mankind. When God fashioned man out from the holy ground He has created for him to bless, toil, and care. We are all descendants of that man, who upon death will have to return to the soil to continue glorifying God. It is a humbling reminder that we aren't fashioned to be great, but to be subjects of the true God who gave us life. While we are all gifted with free will, it is intended for us to explore God in our lives and make use of the freedom we obtained from the heavens to bless, toil, and care for His creation as much as God has blessed, toiled, and cared for His creation. Jesus' triumphant entry to Jerusalem, marked by the waving of the palms, symbolizes the welcome of creation to the presence of their Creator. God abounds in everything He has created, and all things, great or small, holds its essence from Him. The ashes created from last year's palms symbolizes the timelessness of this truth, that we are all taking essence of the one true God who continues to be with us despite all that happened in human history. We are all part of the wondrous process that God has laid out to resonate faith, hope, and love to Him and to one another. The season of Lent isn't a black hole in Catholic history that withholds us from gaining happiness. Rather, it is a constant reminder that our happiness and freedom come from God alone, and His suffering on the cross reminds us of His covenant to happiness and grace for His beloved creation. He suffered because He loves us so much. Even unto death on the cross He shall bear, to constantly remind us of that joyous love He bore for us. Lent is about turning around from our selfish ways and looking up to God who, in His glory and power, has looked down on us, humbled Himself, and become a part of creation to display His union with us. The suffering is our constant union that we are never alone. God, whilst abundant in grace, is willing to show love in the fruits of suffering and torment. True love, in God's majestic plan, is that of giving one's life to another. Suffering and atonement are two distinct acts, yet deeply intertwined in God's love. We all suffer because we love, and we atone because we wanted to remain in the oneness of God's love to His creation. We are bound to be with God, but we must also do our part to enjoin the spirit of suffering and penance to our daily acts. On a human perspective, to suffer and become repentant isn't human nature. It bores divine roots and can teach us ways on how to be faithful, hopeful, and to love like the Lord, who is the tenet of faith, hope, and love, our ultimate Christian virtues. To suffer is also to stay away from what holds us here on earth and become universally connected to the divine, which is partly essenced by the Spirit that gave us life. Our soul, as universal and cosmic, is God's gift to man, whom He shaped from the ashes of Eden to give us the experience of divine charity and universality, which is resonant of the Lord's life, death, and resurrection, as a salvific act to His beloved. The Spirit we bore inside and driving us toward our salvation requires a test of fire. The suffering we have to endure to purify us of our material intentions and polish our spirits to become worthy of the Almighty's grace. And through God's example on the cross, we now know how to be at one with the Lord's divinity and forego the material attachment we have. As we begin the season of Lent, may we all be reminded of the Lord's weary and how it supersedes the material worries we have. May the ashes remind us that we aren't born to be great, but to do great for the glory of the One who has created us. May the palm's broken ashes remind us of the humility we have to bear to obtain the salvation we all long for while we live. Protect us from all our temptations and constantly remind us of the love that God has gratuitously given us, alongside His faith and hope that connects Him and His beloved creation.